Hey everyone, I'm Julie Gunlock, host of the Bespoke Parenting Hour. For those new to the program, this podcast is focused on how parents should custom tailor their parenting style to fit what's best for their families, themselves, and most importantly, their kids. Joining me today is someone I really admire, Sue Zoldak. She is a PR professional living, like me, in the Northern Virginia area, and she launched a parenting advocacy group called Do Better Fairfax City Public Schools last year to push for the opening of schools. Sue, great to have you on.
Thank you, Julie, for having me.
So I've been watching you on Twitter for a long time. It's kind of funny to finally hear someone's voice because
Yes.
I feel like I know you really well, again, because I've been following you on Twitter, but we've never really talked. So it's really great to connect and have this conversation. And I really appreciate how fearless you are on social media, calling out Fairfax school officials for many of their, I should say for all of their decisions as of late. There seem to be very few good ones. But this isn't your full-time job. This is something, you set up this Do Better Fairfax City Public Schools, but you do that in addition to your job, and you have a daughter and you're managing a household. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you launched Do Better.
Yes, and Julie, likewise, I've been following you on Twitter, and it's really great to get to talk to you. And as soon as I started Do Better, everyone's like, you have to follow Julie. She has so many things to say about her school system. So it's just really funny for us to meet this way, because of COVID. But let me kind of explain to you how our lives crossed like this in this I guess unfortunate way, but this is the silver lining of this. I always tell everyone is that I have through my journey met a lot of amazing people. So if we walk back to March of 2020 is when schools all shut down. If we recall, I think that was the approximate date of every school shutting down across the country, not just in Fairfax County here in Northern Virginia. And we started to get a little uncomfortable here when we did not hear from Fairfax County for a week, 2 weeks. What was the plan for doing distance? Why were we emailing? A lot of parents are saying we've emailed the teacher, the principal, and we're getting radio silence. And some parents are also hearing through the grapevine from friends who work at Fairfax County Public Schools, which is I believe the second largest employer in Fairfax County. So a lot of people know people who work there, just saying, oh, we were told to be quiet. We were told not to say anything because we were told not to work. We were told to burn our snow days, to log in as a snow day, because the county doesn't have a plan. The superintendent doesn't have a plan. And so we started getting a little suspicious, and we thought, we need some answers. I mean, this isn't right, and even if you don't have an exact plan, honesty is always the best policy, right? It's better to just come out and say, we're thinking, we're working, if you have questions, this is how you can contact us, just have an open dialogue, right? It's never good to shut parents out. That's the last thing you want to do, especially during a pandemic when parents are worried. I mean, we're both parents. That only makes parents even more hyper. So, fast forward, we were one of the last counties in the area. We're the 10th largest, maybe the 12th largest school district in the country, but one of the largest school districts in this Washington, D.C. metro area, with one of the largest budgets. And we were one of the last to return to distance learning, as everyone did, a month later, mid-April. On the first day, the system that the students used crashed. We come to find out the school had not done any load testing. They postponed another week. The classrooms were then attacked by 4chan. The students were not given private links. So long story short, there were a host of other problems, which we don't have to, detail, and everyone can look through the news and pull up some horrible articles about what happened last April. But we formed at that point Do Better FCPS in order to to just say, there is no accountability in the school system, which has a $3.2 billion with a B budget. There is no accountability. There is no transparency. And the leadership, we're now in question of what kind of leadership this is, because you have to take responsibility for what's happening, for the fact that you didn't have a plan for a month, and then when you did open it up, it failed, not once, but twice.
Right. It's interesting. I hate to interrupt, but I do want to say one thing. It's interesting you say, that we started to notice all this stuff when the pandemic happened. I mean, there's been really nothing good about this pandemic, but I will say, boy, has it opened people's eyes, the education system and the public school education system. You talk about, and now people are actually tuning in. I mean, Fairfax City Public School board meetings are bananas. I mean, completely bananas. And I'm sure that for a long time, maybe some people were tuning in, but not really. The statistics, I've read the statistics on who shows up for a school board election. It's something like only 4% of a town or city's population votes for the school board, and for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's older people who don't have kids. They don't care about the schools. They're not really. They might connect it to the property taxes or property values rather, but they're not really. So they don't really care. People are pretty apathetic about. Not anymore. Not anymore. You are going to have a lot more interest in who gets these elected spots, because it is astonishing just how powerful they are. And when you say $1 billion budgets here, this is critical that we get valuable people into these spots. And I'm sorry for interrupting, but I did want to make that point that, I love these stories of people suddenly going, oh my gosh, I got to pay attention here. This is bad. This needs improvement.
That's exactly right. So, the only point in me telling kind of that background is to just say we formed even before opening schools was an issue.
Right.
I mean, we formed back in the spring. We really got rolling in early summer before we even knew or had an inkling that we wouldn't come back in the fall. I mean, our goal then was just, it seems like nobody holds these people accountable, like you said. And a lot of people move to our area, not just Fairfax, but obviously Arlington, Alexandria, Montgomery County, Loudoun, because they trust that these are supposed to be some of the best school systems in the United States. And that, people here, they are focused on their careers. They work near, the capital of our nation. They want to be able to trust the school system, right? And, and the housing here is relatively expensive. And people say, what am I getting for this?
Well, and that's one of the reasons too, people there is a lot of money in this area, but there's also, there's a lot of people who, don't have, high paying jobs. And so they move to the area because the public schools because they can't, they might not be able to afford the private schools. So they think that the public schools are good. This is an exceedingly expensive area to live in, to buy a house, to purchase a house, and especially to get your foot in the door to purchase that first house. It is very, very difficult. And so again, if you do buy a house, if you're a middle class family and you have kids and, for goodness sake, maybe if a mom wants to stay home, which is nearly impossible too, then you think, okay, well, I'm going to save money, or because you don't have any left, really. And so I'm going to go to the public schools. And now I think people have a very clear vision that is not the case, that these are not good schools, and they are not being run by the most competent people. And they certainly don't care about how parents feel. So it's this great awakening.
It really is. And the thing is, they have the budget to be great. And people, people have this misconception, we shouldn't feel sorry for those people in Loudoun or Fairfax. It's a bunch of very wealthy suburban families. But that is not true, like you're saying. What people do is they scrimp and they save to move into a home here in this area that's much smaller than they could afford in, a Midwestern state, because they know that they can't afford to put 5 children through a private school. So they say, a Fairfax County education is supposed to be just as good, if not better, than a private school. And so we will live in a much smaller home or a condo, and we will get our children the best education by sacrificing. And those are the families that are truly being insulted and hurt by the behavior of the leadership that we have, that pretty much just I don't think they take their job seriously.
No, I don't either. And one thing that what I've discovered, because again, I sort of had this great awakening to the situation as well. But I do want to stress something you said. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on. You started early, man. It was like you woke up and you mobilized, and you were one of the first people that I saw that was organizing, that was really looking at like the budget, was really, reading these decisions and criticizing these decisions. And you sort of had a sense that this was a very important thing, because other communities haven't had as, I would say they didn't stand up as quickly, or they haven't been as aggressive. So I really want to compliment you, because I do think that there's a lot of different groups out there. But Sue, yours has been just wonderful. And I think too, when I say it was an awakening for me, I think part of it is just, it's so overwhelming. And so I didn't really know where to go. And so it was really nice to have you out there and some of these other groups that were out there early, because parents really didn't have a lot of help. And certainly they weren't getting information. You mentioned also, they weren't getting information from the schools. There was no information. Right. And, right. I want to talk a little bit later about sort of the contrast and how some of the different movements operate. But before I do that, I don't want to get off Fairfax. I mean, that was the beginning of it, but like, it's been a year now. It's been over a year. Yeah. What's the condition of Fairfax schools now? Are they open full time? Are they hybrid? Are they giving kids a choice between online, and like what's the situation there?
So we recently, I would say probably in the last month, gave all the students the ability to return to 4 days a week. But what's unfortunate is that not every child took that opportunity. So right. There are some schools where there are perhaps 50% of the students at 4 days, and half, maybe, or a third at 2 days, and a significant portion still choosing entirely virtual for whatever reason. And we find a whole host of reasons, varying from the very sad, we didn't know that school was open, right. Which goes to, the failure of the connection and the communication, or even, the failure to communicate in the right language by, right. Fairfax County schools, but also just, the fear-mongering that I feel the school board themselves, the school board members, are responsible for. Yeah. When you spend a year sending out a message that is echoed by the Teachers Association, it's not safe, not till it's safe. We right. have to go by the numbers. The numbers are high. The numbers are still high. And you have the people who are the loudest, who are at the leadership positions, saying these things over and over and over. But when things change, were they the first people to say it's safe now? No, they were not. I'm still waiting for them to utter those words. Right? Well, there's still school board members that say, do it with caution, do it with safety. And the thing is, you've scared the bejesus out of some of these children and some of these parents, and you've done nothing to go back to them and say, there is no communication. The fact is, statistically, and we know this, that there is less chance of getting COVID in a school building than there is doing virtual learning. A school building is the safest place to be for a child and a teacher.
Yeah, I want to just really quickly, there's also in Arlington and in a lot of Fairfax cities, we're getting to the point like in Alexandria where there are zero reports of COVID infections, zero hospitalizations. We have turned a corner. And I guess the rate now they recalculated it. The chance of a child getting COVID is like 0.00004. I mean, it's like it's so minuscule now. And the way that teachers are, and this is what galls me too, they're continuing the fear mongering with the insistence on masks for a child for 8 hours a day. And let's be honest here. These schools in Alexandria and in Arlington and in Fairfax County are old buildings. They've been around a long time. Okay. Like, and my child goes to a school that was built in 1920, and I don't think it's been renovated. Okay. Like it's got some charming things. There are these gigantic fireplaces. I mean, they're almost like 5 foot tall fireplaces. They're not they don't use them obviously, but that used to be how they warmed the entire school because all the classrooms have them. And so, these buildings are not air conditioned properly. They're not also heated properly. So these kids are in the heat. I always hated going into the school building on a hot summer day because it just wasn't cool, or only certain rooms are cooled and then they open the windows. And so you've got these kids with these masks on, and you know how DC summers are. They're hot, they're humid. And so this insistence on masking is another way to continue the fear mongering. And like you say, they're not correct. They're not offering any statements of, we know it's safe, but these are, this is a precaution that we're taking. No, it's this theater of fear that they're pushing. And again, they're pushing it on kids. It's very galling. To be honest with you, I think the masking is going to be the next big battle.
We hope it's going to go away only because, look, people accuse us of playing politics with all this. And I'm like, I'm playing politics. I mean, if you look at the data, there has been no correlation between mask mandates and the COVID infection rate.
Yeah.
You show me the correlation, and I will say, okay, let's do it. And the fact is, we have said from the beginning, we have been tracking the data, that has come from, Dr. Oyster, and, we've said, look, here's the Qualtrics data. Pull down where it says virtual, and then look at the infection rate of teachers, and then pull down where it says in person and look at the infection rate of teachers, and you'll see that they're nearly identical.
Yes.
Explain that.
Yes.
Why these teachers who are teaching virtually still are getting COVID at the exact same rate as the teachers who are teaching in person. And how can you tell me that you're safer that way? Are you obviously still leaving the house, as you should be allowed to leave the house? You know what I mean? No, it's so, look,
it really is
happening inside the school building.
And I think what is so galling, I use the word I say galling like 15 times a day. That's probably low. I probably say it 100 times a day. But I also find what's so galling is that for the last year, so we have a pretty fun superintendent ourselves. And, for a year, he says things like, we're just following the science. Right? So the entire year when other schools are opening up, and by the way, all private schools are already open, this guy's just, shouting, we're following the science. And then when the science no longer, when things are truly opening up and CDC is saying, like, okay, you don't have to wear your masks indoors even, then suddenly, they kind of shut up about following the science. Or, in our case, so the guidance was 6 feet, that desks had to be 6 feet apart. And then the CDC came out and said, it's okay, you can make it 3 feet, because this became a capacity problem, right? Like it's right. Hard to get kids back in if you don't have the room. And especially in Alexandria, because we have a terrible overcrowding problem. And so when the CDC came out, and again, after a year of hearing this superintendent lecture parents and smugly say, we're just following the science, he then, when the CDC goes to 6 feet, or goes to 3 feet, which means he can bring kids back into the classroom and the capacity issue isn't as big of a deal. He says, no, we're not going to follow CDC guidance. We're going to follow my guidance. And I mean, the steam coming out of parents' ears, it was just, it's so insulting. And again, it shows you that it was never about the science. It is never about the science. And it was about keeping the allegiance and the to that idea, to closing schools, to keeping closed schools, schools closed. It's just amazing to me how dedicated they are to that goal.
Well, and it's, at Do Better FCPS, we are dedicated to a lot of other topics beyond the COVID issue. And what we have learned from looking at all these different topics is that these school board members and these superintendents and these administrators, they seem to have, both a victimhood complex of everyone's out to get us and they don't appreciate how much work we do. So we always have to show, demonstrate how difficult our job is, to the extreme. But also, they seem to strive on being, creating a situation where they can feel like they've come in and be the savior, of your children. We're saving them, from racial incidents. We're saving them from horrible, math or, racist math, or we're saving them from X, Y, and Z. And it's this constant, instead of focusing on how can education be better, it's just focusing on how can we save them from some, horrible thing that's about to, get your kids. And if not for me, your child would be in these dire straits. And, parents, I think, are starting to wake up and be like, hold on a second, but did you actually do, the core job of educating my child to, get them through the grade? Or are you just, like, why, you bought a solar panel, because, it's becoming very clear, right? That they're in the job of patting themselves on the back, right? As opposed to actually saying, how do we make the most out of $3.2 billion so that everybody gets ahead, that, the rising tide raises all boats. I mean, they don't think like that at all, right?
Well, you are fighting for all children, not just your own. You are doing this. And again, I want to read you a little bit of a Twitter thread that Sue put up on March 27th. So essentially around the year anniversary of the schools closing and of her advocacy for all kids and for open schools and just better schools, better run schools. She mentioned this is a $3.2 billion school system. She wants that money to be spent on the kids and on educating these kids. And so the organization she set up has been doing that. And it's really interesting, though, Sue, this Twitter thread, and I want to ask you about it, but I want to read one part of it because you went on Fox News. Laura Ingraham had a really great town hall talking about the closed school situation, right? And it was really interesting. She had some medical. She had a medical panel on there. She had parents, and you were there. And you got some real blowback for going on her show. And one in this, and again, I think everyone should follow Sue Zoldak at Sue Zoldak. It's Zoldak on Twitter. But she has this as her pinned Twitter tweet. I think you do. You said for going on that show and for what she's done, because she's asked a lot of questions of the public school, right? She's shaken things up. She's made people mad with her questions. She says, from there, I have been, people have looked up her business to try to see if she was a lobbyist. She says, I've been accused of being a part of QAnon, being a racist, being a white supremacist. And this one is fun, hating teachers. Sue says in this tweet, I'm a former middle school teacher. I studied at the University of Michigan, Michigan School of Education. I am a current adjunct professor. These accusations are nonstop. In fact, just yesterday, someone who tweeted anonymously posted about my connections to Right Now Women's PAC, which is it's hilarious because I think of that PAC is like, oh, this nice organization that tries to encourage women to run for office. Yes. And like they posted it in this like very conspiratorial way. It's like literally saying you're part of like a church group or like you're part of the junior league. This is not controversial. So anyway, Sue, tell me about like some of that harassment that you've gotten. I assume not just from, sort of the officials at Fairfax schools, but also from other parents.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very unfortunate, just what has happened in our communities, I think nationwide. This is one of the things that I speak to a lot of parents about, like you said, I was one of the first ones to start a group, and a lot of parents reached out and said, wow, how did you do that? We want to model ourselves after you, and even some of their groups named themselves with Do Better in their names, kind of, in honor of what we were doing, which we loved. But also, they took a look at our website and said, how did you do this? We like to learn. But then those questions soon turned to, what are you doing about the bullies? What are you doing? What are you doing about these people who are coming after you? Give us some advice, because this is happening to us too. And so what you pointed out is that, they quickly pointed out that I am in fact a Republican. And for some reason, that means by default that what I'm doing is sneaky, that I'm doing it for personal profit, that
you're
I'm
a Trump supporter,
trying to run a scam, right? That I have created. They have literally accused me, which is very close to libel, to say she's done this as a racketeering organization to fill her own pocketbooks. And I have a business reputation. So what I do in my real time, I run 3 businesses, all of which contain my name. I run the Zoldak agency, which is a public affairs ad agency. I run a research firm called Zoldak Research, and I run a Republican digital agency called Zoldak Victory. But they pick on that last one, which is actually the smallest of my 3 firms and the newest, as if to say, aha, of course. That means that she's up to no good. And, the logic is, I don't even know if you want to call it logic. I mean, even using the word logic in this conversation is, giving it too much credit. But I don't know how that, makes any sense. And, I have a child. I'm a legitimate Fairfax County resident. I've lived here since 2003. I've explained all this publicly. I've used my real name. We use the Do Better FCPS website and Twitter handle because, actually, I don't do this by myself. There's a group of parents that we've been meeting for over a year, twice a month, every 2 weeks. It's a group of about 10 to 12 of us that people rotate in and out depending on their, real life, responsibilities. Yeah. We went through a presidential election time during that year. Imagine living in Washington, D.C. Some people were busy during that time. And, on both sides of the aisle, we have parents. And I could not have built this website with, a spending tracker coded, by myself. I'm not a coder. I try to explain all these people, there's actually a group of people, real parents that help us, and hundreds and hundreds of parents, teachers, students who have signed up, who have sent us tips through the website, who follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter account reaches upwards of 350,000 to 500,000 impressions a month now.
Wow.
And people just want to say, well, you obviously is trying to make money from this. And I'm thinking, what money am I making? First of all, anyone who does, a grassroots parent organization, knows you don't, make money. Imagine trying to say, I ran the middle school PTA and boy, did I rake it in. I mean, right? Somehow I scammed those parents out of, right. I can't even imagine, right? So, if that makes any sense whatsoever, I mean, I guess this makes sense to them. But, but to go further and say, because, we advocated as a group against, what they were doing to Thomas Jefferson High School and their admissions. I'm an Asian American also. That bothers me not only personally, but as our group, we discussed and we were against that. So we always discuss these issues and our stances as a group. They're not just my personal pet peeves, let's say, right?
Well, I actually
it's incredible.
I do want to talk about TJ. I want you to give the audience sort of a quick, a quick elevator speech on what's happening at TJ, because I find that fascinating. And that really connects to sort of this push for, anti-racist and CRT in our schools. But before I do that, I just want to tell you, it's interesting. In my city, we have an open schools group. And one of our city school board members at one point on a recorded Zoom meeting actually said this. She said, well, she was basically complaining about parents who wanted the schools open. She was complaining about them. And she said, look, parents just need to make a decision. They can either have living children, or they can have their children can be dead, or they can be educated. And so in effect saying that if you're going to put your kids back in school, they're going to catch COVID and they're going to die. Okay. And it was just such an insane thing that she said. And, it was a terrible, terrible thing, because it basically suggests that parents don't care. They just want their kids out of the house, whatever. So, this went viral, of course, on Twitter. And she, gave this kind of mealy-mouthed apology, right? But Laura Ingraham did an entire, she did a monologue on it and showed the video. And that's part of the reason it went viral, Also, right. Daily Signal did a story on it. Twitchy tweeted about it, like some pretty high level sort of right of center accounts and media figures focused on this. And I thought that is great. That is great. It gives us some attention. And my goodness, she didn't say that again. Let's just say that. And, I think it was really good that she got the pushback that she did. Well, my open schools group apologized, actually issued a statement apologizing for Laura. And they said, I have it screenshotted, but I don't have I don't have it in front of me. But it essentially was like, we know a lot of you are upset that Laura Ingraham did a story on it. And right. To me, I was like, are you kidding? That made
it worse. I knew that's what you were going to say. Yeah.
No, it didn't make it. We should be grateful to Laura Ingraham for focusing on this.
Oh, right.
And
I agree.
And giving it the media attention it deserves. If a school member has the audacity to talk to parents like that, you want that video to get out there, and you want her to feel the heat. And I think it's great. Okay. I mean, there wasn't any canceling or anything like that. It was just, this is an outrageous thing to say, but to have my open schools group apologize, and because it was right. Icky, right? It was icky. It was on Fox News, right? And I mean, I live in a deeply, deeply liberal area. Okay. Like this Alexandria City is like, I think it's the darkest blue you can get. So I get it, but to issue an apology, and I thought, you know what, we should be grateful for this. We should be grateful for this exposure, showing what parents in Alexandria City are dealing with, the nonsense that we deal with. And so, I think that kind of harassment that you've gotten can go either where there's like, you can react in one way. You can just say, hey, I deny these things. I am not working for profit. I am not QAnon. I am not a racist. But I think that kind of bullying is very intimidating to a lot of people and heaven forbid if they find out one of the heads of the open group is Republican around here, that's a real problem. And that's just very disappointing to me that,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I spoke about that last night at the school board meeting I attended, about that exact fact that our school board, I said to them, you have created a toxic environment in our schools where I now get calls from teachers who say, I can't even socialize or talk at my school about who I really am because the principal has allowed the political banter to go so far that I have to actually lie about who I voted for, pretend to be somebody I'm not, because I'm afraid of the other teachers picking on me. I mean, that is harassment. That is a toxic workplace, and it comes from the top down. It comes from our school board members being all politically left on their social media, and principals feeling like that's the environment that we're allowed to have. And when they talk about diversity and inclusion and equality, they're not taking into account that there are Republicans or conservatives or, people who are of different religious backgrounds who actually are hiding who they are at work, at school, as students, who may have supported Trump, whoever. But again, the point is, it's not for us to judge. A Fairfax County teacher should not be calling me and saying, I'm scared to open my mouth at work, and you're the only person that I can talk to.
Yes, and the thing is that group, for as a conservative, as a Republican in my community, to see that, to be part of this group that's advocating for open schools, and then to see them, sort of give this groveling apology for, icky Fox News covered the issue that they would, they're desperate to get media attention, but then apparently they just find Fox News untoward. It just makes me so mad. And in fact, what it says to a parent like me is, I'm also icky, that they don't want to they don't want to associate with me. And so, there is a demographic of more conservative people in this city who they just basically said, you know what, we don't need you in our group. And so, and again, I have sympathy for people like you who are running these groups, who get bullied and beat up and people say libelous things about you. I have a lot of sympathy for that, but I don't think the answer is to then be like, you're right. These people are bad. These reporters who just gave us national attention are bad. Like, no, you say, you know what, guys, we're going to take any media attention we can get. Right. I don't care if it's I don't care if it's a radio station in Nebraska. I'm going to be thrilled that someone is talking about the problems in Alexandria. And so, I really found that short-sighted.
It's hypocrisy. And I will tell you, actually, a lot of people don't know how I ended up telling that story on Laura Ingraham. So I was actually slated. If you watch the show back, or if look at the photos, you'll see that the chyron underneath our names does not fit at all what we were talking about. It actually talked about, critical race theory. And I was actually slated to talk about curriculum issues. Laura Ingraham, their staff, their producers, they had called me about 2-3 hours before we were going to go live and said, we looked through your tweets and we're actually very concerned about you. We're worried about these tweets of these people harassing you. We want to change your entire segment to be about this. Laura wants to talk about this because she's scared for you that these are so bad. And so we actually, they didn't even have time to change the on-screen graphics or anything. And so, they like to, everyone who, Laura is their producers, they pulled up these tweets and, she was like, tell us about this. And of course, the people that we pulled up, they said, oh, we're so happy. This is the best day of our lives. That, it's our life goal to be featured as a villain on Laura Ingraham, and my response to them was, you need to take this more seriously. Someone at National Fox News pulled your tweets out and actually feared for my safety because of what you were saying and thought that they better switch up my entire segment to talk about this. And you think it's funny?
Yeah.
One of these people is a teacher. One of these people is a teacher at Fairfax County. He thinks it's hilarious.
Is this the guy? I think I know which teacher. I've seen this guy tweeting, like he tweeted to Asra Nomani, who's been fighting this, and to a black father who's also been fighting some of the critical race theory. And he's been tweeting it. I think I know exactly who you're talking about. This guy should have no place near children because he is no place near children. It is sickening.
His parents all the time online. He told one mother who was tweeting about, her problems with her child in PE. He told her PE is not a weight loss clinic, woman.
No.
Another woman was talking about mental health. He tweeted at her, it seems like we must be in a pandemic, huh? Like all this sarcasm, all this. And then worst yet is that last month he tweets, if it were up to me, I'd burn Thomas Jefferson to the ground.
Unbelievable. Okay. So this is a good.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. So this is a good. This is you're very good at this because that's a perfect segue. And I know we've gone over our time, but this is I really do want you to give sort of a quick explanation.
Yes.
Give our listeners, and honestly, you should come back on and we should talk just about TJ. What's happening? Let me give the listeners just a quick. TJ stands for Thomas Jefferson High School. It is. I mean, this is no joke. It is the best high school in the United States. It is number one high school, and it is incredibly respected. It's a science and mathematical high school. Very heavily focused on math and science. And you actually have to take a test to get into this school. Needless to say, I would never pass that test to get into that. When I was a 14-year-old kid, I would never. These are really, really bright kids that get into TJ and Sue. This is all part of, we're kind of shifting gears here away from opening school subject to more of the critical race theory. Tell me what's going on there and how this sort of fight for equity, and I've explained on the show before, equity is not the same as equality, but this fight for so-called equity is really going to destroy TJ. Tell the listeners a little bit about that.
So, there is this constant need in Fairfax County for some reason to, count how many people are in each race. So
Right.
we first have to start there, right? I mean, there's very few board meetings where somebody says, well, in Fairfax County there are 20% Asians. They even, for their resolution to celebrate Asian American Heritage Month, the first sentence was, whereas there are 20% Asians in Fairfax County. I kid you not. So
Good
this
God.
statistic is very important to them. Let's just lay the background. So Thomas Jefferson happens to be 70% Asian. Well, apparently, according to them, that is a fact to be ashamed of. And instead of being proud that TJ is, as you mentioned, ranked the #1 high school in the United States by U.S. News and World Report based on how many people attend college, 100%, by the way, how many people attend an Ivy League college, what the average SAT score is, how many people there go on to successful careers, any statistic that you want to use, right? How many people win national scholarship awards, etc. It's ranked the #1 school. But for Fairfax County, that's nothing to be happy about, because the one thing that is a glaring, horrible, we should be thoroughly embarrassed, is that there are 70% Asians there. So they feel like the reason for that is that Asians study too hard for the entrance test. They have extra tutoring. There is, in fact, in Fairfax County, a few tutoring academies that are taught in Asian languages. There's a Korean language tutoring academy, a Chinese. So let's just say that for some people this is very bothersome.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they want to connect that with something untoward, right? Something unfair. And again, I'm an Asian American. I actually was not born in this country. I was born in Taiwan. And, to say that there is a cultural difference between Asian families and families of other cultures is not an excuse, right? There is, in fact, a cultural difference in how, education and especially math and sciences are viewed by Asian cultures, because there's a right and a wrong answer in math. And I know this is very hard for people to understand. We tend to like those academics because they're concrete, and we're concrete people,
Right.
It just, we don't have a ton of, poet laureates. Okay. We have a lot of mathematics, and it's, I'm sorry to say, I'm going to stereotype, it's a little bit cultural, right?
Yeah.
But not only that, and I spoke about this other very important fact the school board doesn't like to address at a couple of school board meetings ago. There's also something called the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act, which required all the immigrants from Asia to be in a STEM field. So,
are you serious?
In fact, I am in fact serious, because my father was only allowed in this country because he was going to get a PhD in quantum physics.
Oh my gosh.
So the fact is, we had to, Asian immigrants, in order to get a visa, you have to commit to or prove a proficiency in a STEM field. So you can't come in here if you want to be a poet laureate or an English major. They would deny you the visa. So not only is it a cultural interest, we literally, let's imagine, if I could just imagine an analogy, let's say there was a wall, right? And in order to get through that wall, you had to only be competent in certain fields.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is not by our choice. This is the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act.
Fascinating.
So then you factor that into the fact that Fairfax County is a tech, cyber, DOD, corridor. It's a tech corridor, AOL, So there are actually proportionally more tech, STEM, science jobs in Fairfax County, especially in areas like Tysons, Dulles, than in other parts of the country, let's say in Columbus, Ohio. right?
Right.
So now you compound those statistics. And I ask you whether or not having 20% Asians at a STEM school, these are descendants, either first or second generation descendants of people who crossed over this wall, the 1965 Immigration Act, whether it makes sense for you to ask for a one-to-one parity of 20% to 20%. Mathematically and historically, that doesn't even make any sense.
No, it doesn't. So,
I'm sorry that history lesson dragged out a little longer, but this is my personal history. This is my personal history.
Yes.
And it's like, would I be in this country if my dad wasn't a quantum physicist? No.
So you're never invite me over. I'll be like the dumbest person in the room with your family there.
But what I'm trying to say is it's not my fault, right? I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't even know me if it was any other way.
Well,
I would have my family would have been denied entry.
So you've got a situation here where, culturally, math, science, and again, historically, that's who came into the country. And yet Fairfax officials who, don't bother to know any of this or don't care, they're upset. Like you said, they are really obsessed with counting and not in the good way. They're counting. So they want absolute, the proportion of Black people in Fairfax County should be the proportion of TJ. The proportion of so instead of, you said 70% of it's 70% Asian, it should be 20% Asian, and whatever the proportion of Black is. So the point is that is now their goal. So what are they doing to make this happen? They are taking away the test. Is this correct?
They took away the test and replaced it with a portrait of a learner essay, and what they want to call a merit lottery, but is really a lottery. I mean, I don't know if the words merit lottery makes sense in anywhere else other than Fairfax County, but if anyone above a certain GPA, they basically put your names in a hat and draw, and they consider that fair. And I want to stop and say, obviously, as a teacher and as a math person, I want everyone to have an opportunity at a governor's academy like TJ, but the answer would have been to create more TJ, right?
Well,
to create more pathways to it.
Right. The other answer is, I don't know. It's so much bigger than just looking at the school itself. I mean, what is going on that at home that these kids are not doing well in school? It's not just or what is going on in the school that they're at, that math instruction. I will tell you right now, my son at George Mason Elementary School, where my son goes to school, the math instruction is so bad. The funniest part was we have a tutor now for him, and our tutor looked over the homework sheet, which I had to beg for, right? I was like, I want you to send me homework sheets that correspond to what you're learning so I can print them off for my son. And they were wrong. They were actually he gave an answer key with it, and the answer key was wrong. So, I mean, the math instruction is so bad. And so maybe we need to look at schools where, that have a high percentage of Black students and look at what is the problem there. Maybe we need to consider
the bigger problem.
Yeah. So,
exactly. This is not the fault of our hardworking teachers. I love our hardworking teachers, but the way our educational training system works, in the United States, is that teachers who are certified for up to 6th grade, so what we call primary school, do not have to take higher level math. Right? Only people who are certified to teach 7 and up have to take advanced math.
Right.
So, one of the things that we could help prepare more children for a STEM academy like TJ is to just change the math requirement of elementary school teachers.
Out of another thing, out of equity, they've gotten rid of advanced math now. Now Virginia won't be even offering the honors math or advanced tracking for math. So they're actually going to make the wrong
direction.
And I will just say one thing. And look, Sue, I can't imagine ever disagreeing with you, but I will say one thing. I am very tired of feeling like I always have to give teachers a pass. I am real tired of it now. It has been a year, and I've seen very little advocacy on the part of teachers themselves. And frankly, I think the teachers unions are really the force behind closed schools. And I'm really disappointed.
Yeah.
And frankly, I have given so much grace, and I've been so patient for over a year and a half. I still have one in the public school system. We're pulling him out next year. But the point is that, we have my son is a bad math teacher. And like the fear of ever giving ever being critical of a teacher, because there's this pathology out there now, like you're not allowed to ever criticize a teacher. Right. And I'm a little tired of that. And I really openly, I think parents should say, look, this is not great math instruction. And I can afford to get my son a tutor who does intense tutoring with him. And she has done more with Willie. And my son is doing really well, really great. We actually have a separate textbook for him. He's doing a parallel work. But I can afford that. Okay. But this teacher is teaching kids who are in, English learning language, have special needs problems. And he's doing a terrible job, and everyone just kind of looks the other way. I mean, I have been on group Zoom calls about this teacher with other parents, and I say something because I'm like this loud fishwife who's always like screaming about things, but no one else would say anything. And I'm not kidding you. Some of the parents actually said to me, "Oh, I can't say anything because I need that teacher to give my child a recommendation letter for a private school." I mean, do you get more talk about privileged, right? And I was like, what? I'm going to risk it. I'm just going to risk it. And believe me, this guy doesn't like me. And you know what? I asked a different teacher for a recommendation. So I found a way around it, but it is amazing the silence of the privileged people because they don't want to speak up. There has just, and again, I think in this COVID time, there was a short time where you could never criticize a restaurant, if you got a bad meal because of COVID. That's dangerous. You should be able to criticize teachers and talk about, look, teachers should be doing a better job. Frankly, I'm pretty PO'd that teachers are staying at home after getting a vaccine. There's a lot of kids that go to school, that their schools have opened, and that they're sitting in a classroom with a computer, Zooming with their teacher who's at home. So, I get it, and you're nice, and I don't want to slam teachers either, but I've gotten over this sort of tiptoeing around the teacher issue now.
Yeah,
I think they're accountable.
Completely understand that. And we agree with that stance at Do Better. And I myself, I had been, really explaining, what is going to be the impact of collective bargaining,
right.
And on the situation, which is, that's a new development in the state of Virginia. And also we have been advocating, and this may seem like a small thing, but, for parents to not support their PTAs. And because the PTA is just a wholesale, a lumping of all the teachers together, as opposed to individually recognizing the teachers who deserve recognition one at a time. And, why should I give $100 to ever, into a group fund where I would rather just thank the individual teachers who I felt, helped my child, or someone in the front office or whomever who went out of the way for, somebody, either my child or somebody else, and reward them as I see fit, as opposed to constantly being asked to give into this pool, right? Where it just goes to everybody.
Sue, I just did an episode on the PTA and how the PTAs have become they're activists. The national PTA, the shocking things that they promote and want PTAs to get behind. And frankly, the PTAs have been utterly silent during this. They have not had, they had their national convention. And do you know opening schools wasn't on the agenda? They never talked about it, but they did talk about climate change, and they talked about, banning guns, and they talked about a whole bunch of other issues that I have this parenting podcast, almost every single episode has been about the open school issues, because that's what parents are talking about. And the PTA, that is why groups like yours.
I don't know what they're doing.
I don't. Oh my God. I don't know either. You know what they're doing?
Right.
You know what they're doing?
I don't know what they're doing.
You know what they're doing? They're telling women to get in the kitchen and make cookies. I swear that's like the only thing I ever do for PTA now.
Right. They're like, can
cookies.
you bring us a pie?
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not going to bring you a pie. I'm not.
I know.
You know,
Listen.
and the thing is, I will tell you right now, I have sent my daughter's teachers cookies, cupcakes, thank you notes. I have done that for individual teachers who I felt like have been supportive of the difficult year, you know, that children have had. And I have done that individually. You know, if I feel like a principal has done something, I have absolutely recognize them, but I don't need the PTA to be, you know, the intermediary where I give them a pie so they give someone else a pie. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like I'm an adult. I'm going to give them I'm going to decide who gets the pie.
I honestly
Thank you very much.
That is why we have needed groups like yours and the other open schools groups, whether it's Open Arlington, whether it's Open Loudoun County, and Open New York City, Open Chicago. There are all these groups, these little groups are a powerful force that have replaced the PTA. And, you know, the PTA loses is really losing money. People are not joining the PTA, and they shouldn't. All you have to do is go look at the PTA and see kind of the issues that they are pushing and their absolute absence during the biggest upheaval in education in the United States, and they did not have a seat at the table. I am so angry at the PTA, but I am so pleased that groups like yours have come basically to the rescue, are the only voices out there, only organized voices out there that are speaking for parents. And Sue, I can't thank you enough. I think you are so brave. You are so plucky and funny on Twitter. And I know you have other people that help you with Open Do Better FCPS. So thank you so much. And listen, I want you to tell our audience where can they find you. I apologize. My husband's phone is ringing in the background. That'll make a nice addition to this podcast. But tell us where we can find you.
So our group is called Do Better FCPS for Do Better Fairfax County Public Schools, and it's on the web at www.dobetterfcps.com. We are most active on Twitter, which is at Do Better FCPS. We also have recently started a PAC, which we will, because our elections are in 2023 for school board and local delegates, and that is dobetteraction.org, where we'll be soon accepting, basically PAC donations to help influence the upcoming elections.
That's great news. I'm so thrilled, and I'm really glad that you've shifted it into something more permanent advocacy for parents. So you make me want to move to Fairfax County. And
well, we're hoping everyone, every county, every parent become, and we are seeing this, as you said, become motivated to have representation and a diverse voice on the school board, or on the board of supervisors, anywhere where, in the local arena where people now realize it does matter to have diversity, it does matter to vote. And that's what, I would love to end this on is just, a lot of people do say, oh, Sue, thank you for what you're doing. And I don't want to say, you don't have to thank me. I'm just thrilled when people say, I'm involved now. I'm going to stay tuned to this, and, we're grateful. And, I'm going to keep, taking on the rough comments. And I just want people to feel like they can go out there and, be protected and make a difference and know that they're not alone.
Oh, Sue, what a great way to end this. And I really appreciate you coming on. I hope your message gets out there more and more, and you keep being active and keeping these school officials accountable for what they're doing. So thanks again for coming on the Bespoke Parenting Hour.
Julie, thank you so much.
Thanks everyone for being here for another episode of the Bespoke Parenting Hour. If you enjoyed this episode or like the podcast in general, please leave a rating or review on iTunes. This helps ensure that the podcast reaches as many listeners as possible. If you haven't subscribed to the Bespoke Parenting Hour on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, please do so you won't miss an episode. Don't forget to share this episode and let your friends know that they can get Bespoke episodes on their favorite podcast app. From all of us here at the Independent Women's Forum, thanks for listening.